Welcome everyone, Christine here with the discussion about World of Warcraft Burning Crusade Classic and about Blizzard in general, given some recent events that have been happening. Specifically, what I want to talk about here is the same faction Battlegrounds that they're currently still testing. They did one test, they're going to run another, and this is what they had to say about it. Over the last few days, we've read thousands of pieces of feedback on the same faction Battleground test, and we've been working through what we can do in Burning Crusade Classic to meet as many of our goals as possible. And their goals, in regards to the Battleground queue situation, emulate the design pillars and intentions of original Burning Crusade game systems, leverage modern tech, make surgical changes to the game to improve the player experience, address player concerns in ways that capture the spirit of the original design of the game, and that they've heard the clear majority of players telling us that they prefer the same faction Battlegrounds after our first test. During the test, we saw the benefit of drastically lowered queue times and less unavoidable ganking in the outdoor world. However, there were a significant number of concerns registered on other related topic. We noticed that players were dismayed when the system occasionally launched an Alliance versus Alliance battleground. That was funny. And we reduced the likelihood of that a couple of hours into the test. And we think we can do a little more there. The quick queues revealed that a noticeable number of players were doing BGs and organized raids. This makes sense, but they're gonna tackle that. They're gonna reduce the number of people that can join a pre-made to 5. This should have the added benefit of allowing players who are in groups to queue while waiting, to quest while waiting for queues in Battlegrounds. And another major point of discussion was the perception that the faction majority of players chose for their main character would see all players switch to it, unless we change the game to either reward the minority faction, punish the majority faction, or prevent players from choosing to play on the majority faction in the first place. As we can see and we've discussed, most such changes that might come to mind would conflict with our stated goals above. Still, we like to see what happens when we place a reward and minority faction into game. Globally, the faction imbalance is small, but the trend over the last months has been towards a lowered BG participation rate among Alliance players. Not that it was great beforehand, let me just be clear on this. What they're gonna do is some faction backgrounds will be allowed by the matchmaker. The matchmaker will okay. Groups will be restricted, and they're adding an enlistment bonus. That enlistment bonus contains things like scrolls, gold, potions, even badges of justice. So there are several issues here. The first one, the one that Blizzard is actually trying to fix by adding same faction battlegrounds, is the battleground queue issue. Horde has had insufferable queues. They've had them for a while, but they didn't quite matter as much before TBC Classic came out, because now suddenly people care about doing Battlegrounds for the honor, in order to get resilience gear, in order to do arena. So it's a lot more relevant now than it was before. And because Horde has ended up outnumbering the Alliance, though not by quite as much as you might think, but because Horde has outnumbered the Alliance in overall numbers, and certainly in terms of the people that are active participants in PvP, what this has resulted in long queues for the Horde and honestly terrible matches, because you suddenly have Alliance teams. When you do actually have a battleground going, you have you've had situations where there's many Alliance teams, or it's just like whichever random people you can get together, and those tend not to be the greatest teams, though. There is an idea that, Horde is dominating in Battlegrounds. That is far, far from the truth. At some point in Vanilla Classic, sure. Now, however, with TBC, not quite as much, but that's what a lot of Alliance players will say. It's not really true, to be honest. It's a lot more complicated than that. But still, you have a queuing issue, which creates problems in the matches themselves, creates problems in arena, because suddenly you have a lot of Horde players that can't get honor, so they have a choice. They can endure the queues, or they can play arena with little to no resilience, so that's affecting the arena player base in a fairly significant way. And on top of that, because you have such long queues, and because Horde knows they're going to have long queues when they're trying to go into Battlegrounds, what a lot of 4 players ended up doing is they would queue up and then they would go in the open world, like in Terrakar. Akendun is a popular destination, and they would go out of their way to gank people. I mean, ganking is always going to happen, but the sheer numbers of people ganking on the Horde side, ganking Alliance, was pretty incredible, which obviously is going to ruin the experience for a lot of people on the Alliance side. There is an advantage that Horde has on PvP servers versus Alliance. Overall, the player base, like the overall numbers, are not so bad for the Alliance, but when we're talking about PvP, they absolutely are. So with the same faction Battlegrounds, what Blizzard is saying, okay, we're going to reduce the queue times, we're going to reduce the ganking, we're going to fix the problem, and potentially even end up with better Battleground matches. And they're also removing premates, right? Or they're significantly reducing the size of premates, which is also a benefit. So that's all well and good. Now, of course, initially, and even now, a lot of Alliance players were crying over this because it's like, oh, it's going to destroy our faction. There's no reason to play Alliance anymore. If you think having shorter queues was a reason to play Alliance, when Alliance is consistently the weaker faction in PvP, when Alliance is getting dominated in the world PvP, when Alliance is falling behind in raiding, and a lot of these things started happening even in vanilla, when Alliance had a significant advantage but still managed to fall behind, at least on the PvP side of thing. If you think having instant queues is a good enough reason, then, well, I suppose plenty of people believe in Wonderland. But it's not. That's the problem. Alliance does have issues, and that's the second problem here. The faction imbalance is real. Overall numbers, not so bad, but when you're actually looking at the PvP situation, when you're looking at guilds, when you're looking at arena teams, when you're looking at premates and all that, Alliance is far behind. And Blizzard is trying to respond to the outcry from Alliance players who are like, oh, this is going to screw our faction. I don't believe it would. But the bigger issue of Alliance being in a weaker position than the Horde certainly does exist, and Alliance having problems as a faction is certainly true. So what is Blizzard doing? Well, they're doing what a lot of private servers did, which is give incentives to Alliance players to play, or give incentives for people to play on the Alliance side, and in this particular case, to participate in Battlegrounds. Now, will it work? I don't believe it will. And I think that if the intent of what Blizzard is doing, and to the degree that they care about it, to the degree that they actually can bring up a good solution, but if Blizzard is trying to fix the faction balance, they're not going to succeed. The reality is, Horde is the stronger faction. It's stronger because of the players, and it's stronger because a lot of people that are serious about the game, or take the game more seriously, or want to win, there's more of those people that play Horde than Alliance. That's just a fact. Now, you can talk about min-max culture. I don't think it's really min-max culture. I think what has happened over the years is back in the day of vanilla, right, or retail TBC, retail vanilla, a lot of people had sentimentality for these factions, or lore reasons, story reasons. And Alliance was very interesting to play, playing the humans with the Defy storyline, the Nixia storyline, that was very interesting. Nowadays, that kind of sentimentality is less and less. A lot of the current WoW player base, and we can talk here about retail, we can talk about Classic, and certainly things that happen on retail have a major effect on Classic. We've seen this in the way the game is played, we've seen it in player base, we've seen it in the community. To believe Classic is divorced from the player base of retail is just nonsensical. It does have an impact. Well, the reality is the player base just wants to go for what is better, or what they perceive as being better at the very least. It's what I call the Reddit meta in a way. It's not necessarily correct, to be clear. It's like, the way I've described it in the past, people are slaves to what they believe is the meta. Not what actually is the meta, but what they believe is the meta. That's how a lot of people that play WoW consistently, constantly, do so these days. Oh, and it doesn't matter if we're talking here about the hardcore player base. In fact, you actually would see a less on the hardcore player base because the hardcore player base does experiment, does try different things, does try and improve. But it's across the entirety of the WoW player base that you see this over and over again. And so Alliance is in a piss poor situation. Can Blizzard do anything about it? I don't know. I don't think that they have any good solutions. And the question is there any value in this day and age in trying to have two factions when clearly that's not working? Now, obviously, these older versions of WoW, they were built around the idea of having two viable factions, having a viable alliance, having a viable horde. If suddenly one of those factions stops being viable, which is increasingly the case for the alliance, then that creates many issues across the game, especially on a PvP level when it comes to Battlegrounds, when it comes to Honor, and this is already what we're seeing. So the question is, what happens now? Can the issue be fixed? No, I do not believe the issue can be fixed, and I think that's not down to how the game is, it's how players ultimately play the game. And that's, expecting people to give a crap about one faction or faction balance or anything like that in this day and age. No, that's not how it is. There's a lot of people who make the arguments like, oh, I want to play the game this way. Well, a lot of people want to play the game, well, they want to play Horde. A lot of PvPers want to play Horde. A lot of Alliance players don't care to PvP. You can't force that. You can't engage in social engineering to try and fix the issue. Private servers have tried to give significant incentives to Alliance to try and improve the situation, and even they haven't had the success that would be needed to actually have a good situation, good faction balance. Certainly, the situation was better than it has been in TBC Classic so far, but it was not great. Alliance still ended up weaker in the vast majority of cases. The only exception, really, that I've seen was on certain servers where the incentives were so high, and you could even pick your own racials regardless of what you wanted to do. So if you're playing Alliance, you could pick horror racials. It didn't really matter. And that was really the only kind of situation where Alliance ended up being pretty strong. But that was an exception. And I don't think that would necessarily apply to Classic. And the question is it worth putting in all this effort instead of accepting the fact, yeah, Alliance is just not going to be a competitive faction anymore in any real sense? And maybe instead of trying to make it work and having a situation where Alliance gets ganked in the open world, gets dominated in the open world on many servers, has a miserable experience, which is what a lot of Alliance players are saying and what a lot of people have told me. Instead of trying to have that nonsensical situation, maybe it's time to accept that reality. It's not what a lot of people want to hear. It's not what Blizzard wants to hear. Blizzard does care about having two viable factions, but they haven't had any good solutions to this. The best that they've done over the years is make it so that the faction imbalance is not screwing people too much. But the faction imbalance still exists. In other news related to Blizzard, they are getting sued by the state of California, or a state agency of California, for poor treatment of their female employees, including claims of sexual harassment. That's according to the state of California. Video game giant Activision Blizzard, maker of games including WoW and Diablo, fosters a frat boy culture in which female employees are subject to constant sexual harassment, unequal pay, and retaliation, according to a lawsuit filed by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. A 2-year investigation by the state agency found that the company discriminated against female employees in terms and conditions of employment, including compensation, assignment, promotion, and termination. Company leadership consistently failed to take steps to prevent discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. According to the complaint, female employees make up around 20% of the Activision workforce and are subjected to a pervasive frat boy workplace culture. including cube crawls, in which male employees drink copious amount of alcohol as they crawl their way through various cubicles in the office and often engage in inappropriate behavior towards female employees. The agency alleges male employees play video games during the workday while delegating responsibilities to female employees, engage in sexual banter, and joke openly about rape, among other things. Female employees allege being held back from promotions because of the possibility they might become pregnant, being criticized for leaving to pick up their children from daycare, and being kicked out of... Okay, so male colleagues could use their rooms for meetings, the complaint says. Female employees working for the World of Warcraft team noted that male employees and supervisors would hit on them, make derogatory comments, and are engage in demeaning behavior. The suit also points to a female Activision employee who took her own life while on company trip with her male supervisor. The employee had been subject to intense sexual harassment prior to her death, including having nude photos passed around at the company holiday party. The agency seeks an injunction forcing compliance with workplace protections, as well as unpaid wages, pay adjustments, back pay, and lost wages and benefits for female employees. And this is the part that really speaks to me. We value diversity and strive to foster a workplace that offers inclusivity. There is an okay. We take every allegation seriously and investigate all claims in case there's okay. And they distort and make, in many cases, false descriptions of Blizzard's past. We have been extremely cooperative with them for their investigation, including providing them with extensive data and ample documentation, but they refuse to inform us on what issues they perceived. The picture that they paint is not the Blizzard workplace of today. There's also the claim that Alex Afrisiabi, who is one of the big guys of World of Warcraft, engaged in sexual harassment of employees. I believe that was in the article at one point. I think they may have edited it. Now, here's my take on this. And there are many ways to view it. You know, innocent until proven guilty, that the prosecution is going to try and paint the worst picture possible in order to win the suit. All of that is true. All of that is valid. But here's a couple of things I would say. The fact that Blizzard's response is, this is not who we are today, is not very encouraging. Wait, you're saying that this is not how we are today? Yeah, of course, this is not who you are today. Today, no one's working in the office because of, the pandemic. But that doesn't deny any of the allegations. That doesn't make the claims appear invalid. In fact, what that really reads to me is that, like, yeah, we're not denying what happened, but it's like, this is not who we are today. It's like, what? Okay, Blizzard, if that's the best response you have, then, well, quite frankly, it's pretty terrible. That's the first point. The second one is related to Afrisiabi, and that's actually a very relevant one. See, he left the company last year. And then it's like, oh, we've cooperated with them. They had a 2-year investigation. What a lot of people are speculating is that Blizzard let him go quietly. Keep in mind, it would happen quietly. It was not a big announcement, as in the case of many other big names in Blizzard that of his caliber. He was let go quietly, so there might have been some validity behind those claims. And he also had a reputation of being a pretty toxic dude. I mean, he's had that ever even before he started working in World of Warcraft. So there might be validity behind those claims, but I wouldn't jump to conclusions. I would also add, though, that one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to the gaming industry is not something specific to women, but in general about how employees get treated, which is very poorly by their employers. Like the idea, it's like, oh, you want to go pick up your kids from daycare? Too bad, right? You want to take time off to be with your family? Too bad. We've got mandatory crunch in the company to make the fucking game. This is why the gaming industry, one of the big reasons why the gaming industry is struggling so much with making deadlines, releasing new games these days, is because they've gotten used to treating their employees like trash, implementing mandatory crunch, having poor conditions in general. Now, whether or not women had poor conditions because of their gender, that's a whole different discussion, and I'm sure that this lawsuit will settle that in one way or another. Remains to be seen how it will go down. But am I willing to believe the charges? Absolutely. Do I think the gaming industry in general treats their employees like crap? Yes. Do I believe that there were people in Blizzard, including people like Frisiabi, that were pretty big assholes, are still pretty big assholes? Absolutely. And Blizzard's response, as I've said, is not a good one. In fact, it's a really, really, really bad one. It's like, in a way, to me, it's like, oh, admitting that these things happen, but, oh, it's all in the past. It's like, yeah, okay. That's a pretty big problem. And look, a lot of people are going to jump on the opportunity to go after Blizzard because of many things that they've done over the years. They're going to use this and abuse this, but that doesn't mean that these charges aren't true. And Blizzard has gotten worse and worse and worse over the years. So who knows, maybe this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Maybe this is just part of the larger issue that affects the company. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.